Out of all the newcomers that South Carolina's football team has added this offseason, quarterback Robby Ashford is by far the most intriguing. But who falls in line behind Robby Ashford?
You are Locked On Gamecocks, your daily podcast on the South Carolina Gamecocks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, Gamecock Nation, and welcome back to the Locked On Gamecocks podcast. I'm Andrew Lyon, the host of this podcast, and also the lead publisher for Gamecock Digest over on Fan Nation. Thank y'all so much for making the Locked On Gamecocks podcast your first listen or watch for your team every day. We are free and available as always, both wherever you get your audio podcasts daily and also on YouTube. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more right now as new customers can join today and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Shane Beamer and South Carolina's football program have added a bevy of newcomers to their program this offseason, both through the high school ranks and in the transfer portal. And we're just less than a few weeks away from spring practice officially getting underway. And so I was thinking the other day, who are the most intriguing newcomers for this football team? We're going to dive into all of that on today's edition of Locked On Gamecocks, covering 3 guys on the offensive side of the ball and 3 guys on the defensive side of the ball. And so obviously, with this kind of topic, we're going to start with the offense. And when looking at all of the newcomers for the Gamecocks football program, offensively, Robby Ashford absolutely tops this list. And he tops this list as a whole as well. Now, I do want to mention this before I get fully into this conversation. Intriguing does not automatically mean the most talented with this topic. It can mean that, but it also could mean that maybe there's questions surrounding that player's specific role for the upcoming season, or maybe the path that they took to Columbia was a bit unconventional. And in the new era that involves the transfer portal, we certainly see this happening everywhere in college football. So we're going to go over a bevy of different guys, even if they're not maybe the biggest names on the roster. So, with that being said, let's get into Robby Ashford and why he's the most intriguing newcomer that South Carolina has added this offseason. The first reason why he's the most intriguing is simply his background. Robby Ashford comes to Columbia as essentially a college football journeyman, as this is his 3rd football team that he will be playing for in the past few years. He started out over at Oregon in his first couple years of college, and then the last 2 years played under head coaches Brian Harsin and Hugh Freeze over with the Auburn Tigers. And now, Robby Ashford is coming to Columbia in what is, I believe, his final season of eligibility. May be wrong on that, so feel free to correct me if you know for certain. But considering the fact that this is his 3rd school and that Robby Ashford is also an intra-conference transfer, as I just alluded to a moment ago, that makes him quite the intriguing player to look at during spring practice. He'll be one to watch without question this offseason. Another reason why Robby Ashford is the most intriguing newcomer for South Carolina this offseason is the potential fit that he's going to have in Dow Loggains' offensive scheme. When you look at Robby Ashford's career stats, it is fair to say that Robby Ashford is a great athlete who is extremely dangerous with his legs. And due to what South Carolina is going to have on that side of the ball, in terms of personnel in 2024, we might see a lot more RPO-based concepts in this offense. We also might see a lot more QB run options in Dow Loggains' playbook. And if those kind of concepts are going to be implemented, that is definitely going to suit Robby Ashford's skill set, perhaps a lot better than maybe what last year's playbook would have done with the talent that he possesses. And then the last reason why Robby Ashford is without question the most intriguing prospect or newcomer out of all the newcomers this offseason is the fact that in spite of what all I've said to this point, the experience that he brings, SEC experience, and his fit in this offense, it's pretty much being assumed by just about everybody that's in Columbia and that covers this team that he's going to be quarterback number 2, and Lenore Sellers is going to be the starting quarterback. Lenore Sellers, again, he only took 20 to 21 snaps in his true freshman season back in 2023. But we all know, of course, the hype that surrounds Lenore Sellers, the amount of talent that he does seem to possess, the cannon of an arm that he has, how great of an athlete he is, along with the size that he brings to the quarterback position. It is just a rare blend of physical intangibles that we just don't see very often at that position. But it is also fair to say that Robby Ashford would not have come to South Carolina if he didn't feel like he could win the starting quarterback job here with the Gamecocks. And Shane Beamer, he has said in the past that the only thing that he promises to transfer, specifically guys that are transferring and play the quarterback position, is that they're going to get a chance to compete, but they're not going to be guaranteed anything beyond that. So it's interesting that although Shane Beamer has made that clear in the past, he has made that proclamation that Robby Ashford is going to be here with this football team in spring practice, and we're going to see what happens between him and Lenore Sellers. You have to imagine that those are the two main guys that are going to be duking it out for that starting quarterback job. Dante Reno has not played a single college snap to this point, nor has he been through a official college football practice. That will, of course, change in mid-March. And Luke Doty, it appears now, is listed as more of an athlete on the roster, which is kind of the coaching staff's way of signaling that his career as primarily a quarterback is likely over at this point in time. So, because of the background, his fit in this offense, and also the storyline surrounding where he stands on this depth chart right now, Robby Ashford is easily, by far and away, the most intriguing newcomer that South Carolina's football program has added to this roster this offseason. But Robby Ashford is not the only guy that we're going to talk about on the offensive side of the ball. We've also got a couple guys that have definitely proven themselves by this point in their college careers, but they did so at a lower level. So could those guys parlay that success into a great season here at South Carolina in 2024? I'll talk about those two guys on the offensive side of the ball in just a couple moments right here on Locked On Gamecocks. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Get buckets with your first bet right now on FanDuel, as new customers can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. The Rookie of the Year race in the NBA this season has been quite interesting, and it's essentially down to two different guys. Victor Wembanyama of the San Antonio Spurs and Chet Holmgren of the Oklahoma City Thunder. Now, Victor, through 49 games this season, is averaging 20.5 points, 10 rebounds, and 3.2 blocks per game. Pretty good stat line. By the way, he leads the NBA currently in blocks. Chet Holmgren, however, he has a case to be made here, as he, through 54 games, is scoring 16.7 points per game and adding 7.6 rebounds and 2.6 blocks per game to boot. Also, the Thunder look like they're going to make the playoffs this season, while the Spurs, they've been meddling in mediocrity for the last several years now. So, if you're interested in putting some money down on the Rookie of the Year race, or look at some other prop bets for your favorite players or teams, just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NBA. Welcome back to this Tuesday edition of the Locked On Gamecocks podcast, where we cover your South Carolina Gamecocks every single day. And as always, a big thank you to each and every one of you everydayers who make the Locked On Gamecocks podcast your daily listen wherever you get your audio podcasts daily, or your daily watch on YouTube. Now, outside of Robby Ashford, the next two most intriguing newcomers on the offensive side of the ball for South Carolina this offseason are wide receiver Gage Larvadain and tight end Brady Hunt. So, let's start off by talking about Gage Larvadain, who, if you do not remember, has transferred to South Carolina from Miami of Ohio. Side note, great job baseball team this weekend by sweeping the Red Hawks and getting a combined no-no on Sunday, only the 8th in school history. Congrats to the Gamecocks baseball team for their success in that regard. But getting back to Gage Larvadain real quick. There's a couple reasons why I list him here. One is the discrepancy in how his addition is viewed amongst those within the industry. When you look at the transfer portal rankings from On3 Sports and 24/7 Sports from this offseason, there's a pretty significant gap in terms of how they rate Gage Larvadain. If you look at On3 Sports, they rate Gage Larvadain as the second best portal pickup for the South Carolina this offseason, a 4-star portal pickup at that. But you look at 24/7 Sports, they have Larvadain tied for the 11th best spot out of the 20 guys coming in to South Carolina's football program via the portal this cycle. Basically, an 87.00 rating as a mid 3-star out of the portal. So it's really interesting to me that those two sites, the two main sites when it comes to tracking the transfer portal in college football, have such varying opinions on the kind of impact that Gage Larvadain could have for South Carolina. So that's one reason why I think he's an intriguing guy to watch heading into spring practice. The second reason why is more of a question than anything else. Is Gage Larvadain another Juice Wells? And what I mean by that is this. Juice Wells, he started his career obviously at James Madison, and he balled out for the Dukes. He then eventually transferred to South Carolina, and his play did not drop off in the slightest when he was healthy. When he was healthy, he was one of the best wide receivers in the entire SEC. Obviously now he's with Ole Miss, and I get it. There's some bitter and hard feelings with all of that. But the point is, you cannot deny that Juice Wells, he was a really good player when he was here in Columbia. So could Gage Larvadain be another Juice Wells in that sense? Because when you look at Gage Larvadain's career, this is his third school, much like Robby Ashford, as I mentioned earlier. But Larvadain has had notable success everywhere he's been in his college career. He started his career with Southeastern Louisiana University in the Southland Conference at the FCS level back in 2021 and was there through the 2022 season. In 2021, Larvadain was named the Freshman of the Year in the Southland Conference, along with a first-team selection as a kick returner, and was also named a second-team selection as a wide receiver. He then went to Miami of Ohio this past fall, going up to the FBS level in the MAC Conference, and his play really did not drop off all that much. Gage Larvadain was third in the conference in receiving yards with 679. Obviously not necessarily an eye-popping number, but I think it still says a lot that Larvadain went from the FCS level at a place like Southeastern Louisiana that's not known for being a football powerhouse. And then he goes to Miami of Ohio, and he continues to see success there. Now, he comes to South Carolina looking to do the same exact thing. The other thing that I think makes Larvadain quite the intriguing newcomer this offseason is the kind of role that he might get with the Gamecocks. He might already be South Carolina's biggest outside threat in this wide receiver core, because when you look at Pro Football Focus and the data that they have on Gage Larvadain's career, 373 or 49.5% of Larvadain's career snaps have taken place with him lined up outside the numbers. So obviously that tells you that, it's not going to be necessarily a massive transition for him in terms of where he's lined up in the offensive formation itself. However, the difference obviously here, as I'm sure plenty of people will say, is he's going to be facing SEC cornerbacks. He's no longer facing guys at the MAC level or the FCS level. You're facing legit, athletic, likely at least day 1 or 2 talent every single week at some point in time in this conference. So certainly interesting to see what Gage Larvadain is going to do against higher level competition in 2024. Now, the last guy I want to talk about on the offensive side of the ball real quick is tight end Brady Hunt, who transferred to Columbia from Ball State. Now, as I kind of did with Gage Larvadain at the very end of that conversation, this is more so a question than anything else. Can Brady Hunt be the most successful converted tight end since Hayden Hurst was here at South Carolina? Now, for those of you who may not remember off the top of your head, Hayden Hurst came to Columbia as a wide receiver initially when he was playing here in 2015. And then the following season, when Will Muschamp and his staff came here and took over, they converted him over to tight end. And Hayden Hurst just took off from there. He was named a first-team All-SEC selection in 2017 and wound up being a first-round pick in 2018, the 2018 NFL Draft, I should say. Now, Brady Hunt, he switched from quarterback to tight end when with Ball State back in 2021, and he wound up becoming a first-team All-MAC and freshman All-American selection in 2022, just one season later. So the development here is quite notable. Now, Brady Hunt did miss all of 2023 with a foot injury. And sure, he might not be the number one tight end in this offense. He'll likely be number two behind Joshua Simon. But with Sean Elliott coming back to Columbia and the experience he has in terms of coaching up blocking techniques as a O-line coach by nature, I think that Hunt could unlock an even higher level of production at the tight end position. So I'm not saying Brady Hunt's going to turn to a first-round draft pick by any means with South Carolina, but I think that with Sean Elliott being his coach and what he's already proven he can do in such a short time at the tight end spot, he's a guy that fans are going to want to pay attention to as spring practice rolls along for South Carolina in a few weeks' time. Now, we've talked to this point about the offensive side of the ball a good amount, but now I want to switch gears and talk about the defensive side of the ball. And this time, we're going to talk a lot more about some high school additions that could make a big impact for this team in 2024. We'll talk about those guys in a few moments right here on Locked On Gamecocks. Today's show is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring for your small business, you always want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. And that's why you should check out LinkedIn Jobs, because they have the tools to help find the right professionals for your team, not just faster, but also free of charge. LinkedIn has a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals worldwide. And that is a big reason why 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours when they use LinkedIn Jobs. And for that reason, 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn Jobs for hiring. So why not join them? Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free today. Terms and conditions do apply. Welcome back to today's edition of the Locked On Gamecocks podcast, where we cover your team every single day in just 30 minutes. Now, as I kind of alluded to a couple moments ago, the most intriguing defensive newcomers for South Carolina's football team this offseason, in my opinion, are the ones that are the most green in terms of their college careers, but they also possess sky-high potential, each and every one of these guys. So, we're going to have three we're going to go over real quick. Let's start off with a guy that I'm going to group together with someone else that could play his position, Dylan Stewart and Wendell Gregory. Now, both of these guys, obviously very highly rated coming out of high school. Dylan Stewart being listed as a 5-star and playing in the Under Armour All-America game just a little over a month ago, a game that he wowed a lot of fans in terms of the explosiveness that he displayed off of the edge. But both of these guys, it's not just their talent that makes them intriguing. It's also where these guys could fit in Clayton White's defense. And that's something that I think fans are going to want to pay attention to as spring practice rolls along. Right now, we don't know for certain what kind of base defense that Clayton White is going to roll out there. It is fair to say that he's going to use the 3-3-5 because that's what he used at the end of the last season. But also at the same time, it took forever for South Carolina to make a change that clearly, based on the month of November in 2023, was a change they probably should have made a lot sooner. So maybe Clayton White wants to keep that 4-2-5 formation in his playbook, and maybe he wants to split time up between both. And that's where Dylan Stewart and Wendell Gregory come in, because both of their skill sets differ a little bit, at least in my opinion. When you look at Dylan Stewart, he is obviously a guy that you want lined up on the line of scrimmage. You want him on the edge. I think that he fits much better as a 4-2-5 pass rusher. He might be the sole reason why you keep using that 4-2-5 formation like you had in years past if you're Clayton White. But then you look at Wendell Gregory and the skill set that he possesses, and in my opinion, he's a better fit as a 3-3-5 outside linebacker. He's not a guy that you revolve your entire defense around like a Dylan Stewart, but I think that that's where his talent is best suited. Some people do see him as a 4-2-5 edge rusher. To be honest with you, I haven't seen it at all to this point. I think that he could certainly be maybe a weak side edge rusher, a stand-up guy in a 2-point stance. But that's where Wendell Gregory, he becomes a bit more of a question mark in terms of what is his position going to be in his college career. He's kind of a tweener. And for those of you who might be wondering, well, what the heck is a tweener? It's basically where you have a football player that look like they could play a couple different positions, but they're not going to be an absolute perfect fit for that spot. So you could see how they might fit maybe as an outside linebacker, or maybe they might bounce between that and being an edge defender. That's sort of what a tweener is. Another example on South Carolina's roster right now, another guy who's very talented, is Nick Emenwari. Some people think he's better as a linebacker, but you could also make the argument that he is better as a roaming safety in the defensive secondary. So, where are Dylan Stewart and Wendell Gregory going to fit in Clayton White's defense? That is why, in my opinion, these two guys, along with their talent, they are the two most intriguing newcomers on defense for South Carolina heading into spring ball. The last guy I want to touch on real quick is safety Kelvin Hunter. Is he the next Jaylon Kilgore? When we went into this past season, Nick Emenwari and DQ Smith, they were the two guys that were being talked about at that safety position. And for good reason. Both of those guys were named freshman All-Americans in 2022, did a great job of stepping up when certain guys in front of them either just were not getting the job done or unfortunately got injured and could not play for an extended period of time. And so going to last year, it was kind of thought of, those are the two guys that are going to man that secondary from those safety spots. Then they dealt with injuries a little bit this past fall, and a guy like Jaylon Kilgore comes into the fold. A guy that was highly touted coming out of high school, and we all thought, was one of the more underrated guys out of that upper echelon of the 2023 class that Carolina brought in. But I don't think anybody expected him to make as much of an impact as he made in 2023. And it got to a point where, Clayton White and the defensive coaching staff, they were just kind of like, we got to find a way to get Jaylon Kilgore on the field, no matter what. Like, we can't have this kid sitting on the bench all game because he's just too valuable. He brings too much to this defense and to this football team as a whole for us to have him sitting here rotating in for about 15, 20 snaps on average a game. Kelvin Hunter might be another Jaylon Kilgore in that regard. Now, I don't see Kelvin Hunter cracking that safety lineup at any point unless they run 3 safeties in a 3-3-5. Then Kelvin Hunter has a much better shot, in my opinion, of seeing the field defensively in year one. But the reason I list him here is because of not just what he could do defensively, but as we talked about before, Kelvin Hunter, he was a menace on special teams for West Florence High School over the past couple years. Can block punts, is a guy that can return kickoffs back for a touchdown. Again, if Pete Lembo was still here, I would imagine that he would be pretty excited about having him out there on multiple special teams units. Now, obviously, it's Joe DeCamillis who comes here from Texas and originally the NFL, but still, Kelvin Hunter, I think it's not a matter of if he's going to make an impact, but how much of an impact is he going to make? And obviously, this coaching staff, they will get a good idea of what Kelvin Hunter can do as they go throughout the off season. So, those 6 guys, in my opinion, are the most intriguing newcomers for Shane Beamer and the Gamecocks this off season. Do you agree with the guys that I listed on today's show, or are there some other guys that I left off that you think were worth mentioning? No matter what your thoughts are, let me know your thoughts down below in the comments section if you watch today's show on YouTube, or you could shoot me a direct message on X at @ALion_SC if you listen to today's show on an audio podcast app. As always, thank y'all so much for tuning in. Have a great rest of your Tuesday, and I'll be sure to catch y'all on the next show of the Locked On Gamecocks podcast.